Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Really excited for this video as the NBA Draft Lottery approaches this weekend, May 12th. I wanted one more mock draft up on the channel with a lottery simulation. This will be the last lottery simulation we do for a mock draft, of course, in this 2024 NBA draft cycle, but I'm super excited for it. I hope you guys are as well. So let's jump into that lottery simulation right now. The Pistons, Wizards, Hornets, and Blazers all have a 50% chance or better to be picking in the top 4. So that is important to watch for in this lottery simulation. And we're going to simulate in 3, 2, 1. The Wizards move up to pick number 1 in this mock. The Toronto Raptors actually jump up to number 2. The Atlanta Hawks move all the way up to number 3. That obviously shakes things up quite a bit. The Hornets move down to 4. Pistons fans, yet again, I'm sorry to hear it for you guys. You move down to number 5 in the mock again this week. Obviously disappointing, but if you're a Pistons fan, maybe this is getting your bad luck out of the way. We're using these Tankathon lottery sims to get the bad luck out of the way for Detroit before the actual draft lottery. This weekend, Portland down to 6, San Antonio down to 7. Let's get into that mock draft now. All right, it is now much later in the day, but here we are now with my 2024 NBA mock draft. Remember, lottery simulation, and if you guys do enjoy, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It lets me know I'm doing a good job here at Utility Sports and that you're enjoying the NBA draft coverage. We're going to have a lot more coming out over the next couple of months leading up into the NBA draft. Without further ado, let's jump into it here with pick number 1, the Washington Wizards. And the Wizards here winning the lottery in this mock simulation would be huge for them if that actually comes to fruition on the night of the NBA Draft Lottery, because this team, in really the first true year of their rebuild post Bradley Beal, post Kristaps Porzingis, this Wizards team, first of all, I think they did a good job getting Bilal Coulibaly in the last draft. He's a nice build with piece. He's a player who I think can be an impactful winner around other talent. Now, Washington has a long ways to go in adding that talent. They were not a very good team this year, obviously, but getting the first overall pick gives them a option here to draft a player who, like Coulibaly, could be a very high impact player on the defensive end of the floor. And I think that's really where Washington should start. With their overall identity and team building, they should look to build their roster out with versatile, defensive, freakish type players. Coulibaly obviously has a ton of length and defensive acumen. And I think first overall, they're going to have the ability to add to that here with Alex Sarr, another French prospect here for the Washington Wizards. And I think it's a huge win for the organization getting Sarr in the building. They traded Daniel Gafford this past trade deadline to the Dallas Mavericks. They got pretty good value for him, in my opinion, a first-round pick in this year's draft through a 3-team deal with the Oklahoma City Thunder involved. But ultimately now Washington's in a spot where they can replace Gafford with a player who, in my opinion, has a significantly higher upside than Gafford and similar strengths as a rim protector. Obviously not quite the physical rebounder that Gafford has been at times in his career, but I think overall for Washington, getting Sarr here, not only does he fill the void that you now have after trading Gafford, but he's an improvement upon Gafford as well. And I don't say that as, any disrespect to Gafford. I think Gafford's a good NBA player, but I do think Sarr has the potential to be a defensive identity piece, a real chess piece for a coach. Do you want to switch at the level of the screen? Do you want to play with a high wall? Do you want to hedge and recover? Do you want to play and drop? Do you want to play in deep drop? I think Sarr can do a lot of those things. Now, there's going to be some learning curve along the way, right? He is still a teenage kid. He's not just going to drop into the NBA and be one of the best defenders in the world like we saw from Victor Wembanyama. That's what made Wemby so special last year. But I think Sarr has a lot of the traits that make him viable long-term as an elite defensive prospect with a solid offensive game to boot. He handles the ball. He's capable of pushing it in transition. And at some point, Washington might play into that. They might lean into him having the ball in his hands a lot, generating offense for them, especially early in this rebuild, giving him opportunities to grow as a playmaker and really extend himself as an offensive player as well. So Washington here, they do a great job getting Alex Sarr first overall, building to their defensive identity and really establishing who they are going forward. Pick number 2, the Toronto Raptors. For the second straight week, the Raptors have the second overall pick. Hopefully I'm not jinxing them for the NBA draft lottery. Remember, this pick could potentially go to the San Antonio Spurs if it falls down to number 7 on lottery night. But nonetheless, here they are at pick number 2 now. And the Toronto Raptors I have going with forward Zaccharie Risacher, another French prospect, goes here. And my rationale for mocking Risacher to Toronto: first of all, this is kind of the draft archetype of someone like Masai Ujiri, who loves length and size, and Risacher standing around 6'10", with a positive wingspan in the 7-foot+ category. First of all, from a just size length component, he's going to be a unique fit next to their already very lengthy starting lineup with RJ Barrett, Scotty Barnes, obviously Jakob Poeltl's in there. You have a lot of length and size already on your roster, but Risacher, I think, offensively is a good fit because of his willingness to play off of the catch, and I think that's an important thing. Obviously, when you're scouting and evaluating talent, a lot of people look at the concept of spacing, and can this guy shoot the basketball? How does that benefit the spacing? Obviously, Risacher, one of his top traits is shooting the ball, but I think off of that, his ability to attack closeouts, there are signs that would point Risacher into growing into a player who not only is going to be a shooter, but someone who can shoot, and then because of that, when teams close out on him very hard, he'll be a plus player off the dribble in short bursts. It's not like he's going to be a point forward, it's not like you're going to run your offense through him, but he's going to be able to take advantage of bad closeouts, take advantage of defenders off balance. He's going to get to spots inside the arc and either be able to score out of that or make the extra pass there as well. Again, I'm not projecting him to be a 6-7 assist forward, but what I am projecting him to be is a quality decision maker in advantage situations, and I think his shooting plus his size and length and defensive upside paint him as a very well-deserving top 5 prospect potentially in this draft. Obviously, there's still a lot to see. Draft combine coming up, that's going to kind of shape our perspective on these players a little bit more even. We're going to continue to get more and more information on these guys over the next couple of weeks, but Risacher right now definitely is still slated in the top 5 for most people, and that's where I have him here in this mock at number 2 overall. Pick number 3, the Atlanta Hawks move up, and very, very luckily for them, they do, because this is a team that has a lot of questions going forward. I've harped on the DeJounte Murray, Trae Young conversation now in the last few mocks, and I don't want to get into it too much, but obviously one of them likely will not be back in Atlanta, and if they are, we're probably looking at a team that's in the play-in again. So the Hawks have some work to do. How do they look about building up their roster? And if you're Atlanta, can you afford to do anything other than best player available at this point? In my opinion, you can't really afford to do that. So 3rd overall, I have the Atlanta Hawks here selecting Ron Holland, forward/guard, kind of a wing hybrid out of G League Ignite. And what are some of the things I love about Ron Holland and his game, specifically when it comes to Atlanta? First of all, I think his infusion of athleticism off the wing would be huge for them. For the most part, it's a finesse team. Now, obviously, they do have players there like Jalen Johnson, Clint Capella, who can be big-time finishers at the rim with great athletic traits. There's no question about that. Having another one of those guys isn't going to hurt, especially around someone like DeJounte Murray, who's an elite pull-up mid-range shooter, and someone who is very capable as a finesse finisher as well. And then Trae Young obviously lives off a pretty heavy diet of floaters and deep-range three-point shots. So getting some more just athleticism and physicality on your wings, I think, will be beneficial for them. Even if you look at their bench with Bogdan Bogdanovic, they just have a lot of finesse style offensive players in their arsenal, which is a good thing because there's a lot of skill there, but getting Holland gives you a little bit more downhill juice, a little bit more physicality that I think would get Atlanta on the free throw line a little bit more as well outside of just Trae Young. So I think Ron Holland here offensively makes a ton of sense, and then defensively, even though he hasn't been super consistent yet on the defensive end of the floor, there are a lot of flashes where you see his defensive playmaking, you see his active hands, his athleticism coming out to play when it comes to getting in the passing lanes, disrupting the ball handler, and making plays on the weak side of the floor as well. So Holland, for me, there's still a lot of upside here. I know some people are kind of out on Holland. There are some concerns with his playmaking and the reliability of his jump shot moving forward, but there are still a lot of people who are big-time Ron Holland truthers, where they're betting on the size, athleticism, and that combination, kind of breeding a good downhill finisher and a good downhill player at the NBA level. Pick number 4, we move on to the Charlotte Hornets. Last week in our mock, they moved down, so this is a completely different situation for them. And the Hornets here, I think a team that could really go a number of different directions. They could look at a big man. Are they sold on Mark Williams and his health? Obviously, they have a new ownership group there, new GM. There's not really a tie to any of the players. Now, LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller are going to be there long-term for sure. Mark Williams, I think the Hornets would project him to be there long-term, but if they really love Donovan Clingan, I could just flat out see them taking him. Now, I didn't go that direction in this mock draft, okay? I think the Hornets, the big goal for them, and this should be the goal for pretty much every single team on draft night, how do we improve as a roster and how do we push ourselves toward winning? And a player that stands out to me here, 4th overall, for that specifically as a fit piece next to LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, is guard Stephon Castle out of UConn. I think this is a home run pick for the Hornets, 4th overall, for a few different reasons. First of all, he projects to be a very good point of attack defender, screen navigator, and someone who's going to be able to stay attached to the body of primary ball handlers at the NBA level. And you might say, okay, well, is that worth a top 4 pick? Well, look at what Minnesota's doing right now to Denver. I think having great point of attack defenders, great perimeter defenders, especially come postseason time, is super important. So for a team that I think needs a little bit more hard-nosed players on their roster, a few more of those guys, Stephon Castle already brings that for you if you're Charlotte, but I think there's more upside than people typically perceive or assume with Castle. Obviously, he's been a gap filler for his college career in UConn, was a winner there. Now, I'm not going to put a ton of stock into that. UConn had a stacked roster and a very good head coach. It's not just Stephon Castle willing them to victory, but what I will say about Stephon Castle and the way that he plays is it does help teams win. He gets to loose balls. He's going to get on the offensive glass as a guard. You have to box him out, and he takes advantage of mental mistakes. And I think he also has an improving handle. He's pretty electric downhill, honestly, if you turn on the tape. There are moments where he's hitting guys with crossovers behind the backs, and I think if you can find some consistency and stability out of that for him, where, again, you're not asking him to be a primary ball handler next to LaMelo Ball, you're asking him to be a secondary or tertiary playmaker, and that's where I think you find his value as well offensively. Now, the jump shot definitely needs to take some strides forward, but I do think this is a big-time home run pick for the Charlotte Hornets, 4th overall. Moving on to pick number 5, we have the Detroit Pistons. And Pistons fans, remember what I said in the open. It's okay. We're trying to give you guys good luck by jinxing you early here and sending you the 5th overall pick in back-to-back mock drafts. But 5th overall, let's say, disaster strikes again in Detroit. They do get the 5th overall pick. The big question here, do you go based off of upside and talent, or do you draft based off of fit? And just like I said with Charlotte, Detroit should push themselves toward winning basketball games. That's exactly what you need to be doing, especially if you're a team that finished with the worst record in the NBA. Again, the Pistons just have not been very good the last couple of years. They need to find someone who is going to fit alongside their already very talented young core. I don't think that they need to take based off of upside, especially in this draft. In fact, I think they should do the opposite. And they're going to draft Reed Sheppard here, guard out of Kentucky, 5th overall. Now, I know some Pistons fans are probably already typing saying, oh my gosh, we don't want to take Reed Sheppard 5th overall, this, that, or the other thing. He's a good basketball player. Now, yes, he's not going to be a 25-point, 10-assist guy in the NBA, but he could see him being a 16-point and 5-assist guy, or maybe an 18-point and 5-assist guy, even if things go super, super well for him. Now, I'm not suggesting that that for sure will happen. I could see him being a 13-point, 5-assist guy, 13-point, 4-assist guy. At the end of the day, though, if you're trying to draft, it doesn't really matter what players you draft when it comes to how many points they put up. Now, I know that sounds ridiculous to say. I know people are going to say, what do you mean? You want to draft guys who are going to be all-stars? Obviously, you would love for that to happen, but at the end of the day, what you should be drafting for is your team outscoring the other team. And Reed Sheppard, even if he's not scoring, he's going to provide stability and spacing for an offense that drastically needs it. The Pistons have like 0 shooting on their roster right now, especially reliable shooting that is dangerous and teams have to really respect. Reed Sheppard would be one of a kind there in Detroit. So I think his value with the Pistons would far exceed whatever his box score numbers end up looking like throughout his career because of the spacing he would provide next to Cade Cunningham, the functionality he could provide as a ghost screener, a small-to-small screener, and also a secondary ball handler, probably off the bench early in his career. This is a home run for the Pistons. I know Pistons fans probably won't like it. They're going to say, oh, what about the upside? What about the raw talent? Well, he's pretty talented. Okay, he shoots the ball really, really well. He can handle the rock. He can dribble, pass, shoot. Those three areas of basketball are really at the core of good NBA players. If you can dribble, pass, and shoot, you're going to be pretty good at basketball. And I think Sheppard definitely fits that characteristic. Moving on to pick number 6, we have the Portland Trailblazers here. And for Portland, how many times this year have I mocked this player to them? It's been a bunch, but I just think it makes a ton of sense. They have DeAndre Ayton, who played pretty well down the stretch of the season. Obviously, we'll see what happens with Robert Williams if he comes back from injury healthy, and is he even still on Portland by the end of the trade deadline next year? We'll see. There's a lot of questions there, but they have a collection of guards. They have a couple of big men that I know they like internally. They need more forwards. They need more forward play. Specifically behind Jeremy Grant. We'll see how long Jeremy Grant's there in Portland. That's obviously a question as well. But 6th overall, I have the Portland Trailblazers selecting Matas Buzelis, forward from the G League Ignite program. One of the higher touted recruits coming into this year's draft cycle. My way too early mock draft, I looked at Matas Buzelis as the potential #1 pick in this year's class. Since then, Alex Sarr has kind of shown a little bit more. Zaccharie Risacher kind of cemented himself. And Buzelis, who missed a little bit of time early in the G League Ignite season, just didn't have the runway to showcasing himself as a likely #1 pick. But what I do think about his game, he has a lot of talent. He has the physicals to boot as well. I think he's an underrated athlete. At about 6'10", he's very, very fluid, capable of making plays off of a live dribble. Now, he's not a point guard. He's not a point forward, anything crazy like that. But he's a connective piece. He's somebody who you put into a lineup, he's going to cut off the baseline, you're going to be able to hit him, and from there he can make the next play, whether that's a reverse finish, whether that's a strong side finish off of 2 feet. Can he hit a stride stop? Yes, he can. Can he pass the ball off of that live dribble? Yes, he can. And he has the ability to read the floor a bit as well. Defensively, I think, again, an underrated athlete. I think he's going to be able to make plays both at the rim and on the perimeter. He's a connective piece. He's going to help your defense by being a good quality team defender. Now, he's not going to be a point of attack stopper. He's not going to be a one-on-one isolation player either offensively, but he's going to fill some of your gaps on both sides of the ball, and I think that's something very valuable for Portland. They don't have a lot of quality two-way players right now. I think Buzelis can turn into that, grow into that, and I think offensively specifically, he gives you a little bit of a boost in your playmaking in your front court, which is badly needed at this point in time there in Portland. Moving on to pick number 7, we have the San Antonio Spurs. Again, a team that could potentially have 2 top 7 picks depending on what happens with that Raptors pick on the actual night of the draft lottery. But in this mock, they kind of got a little screwed, honestly, moving down to 7 themselves, and they didn't even get that Raptors pick. So obviously unfortunate for San Antonio, but here they still have an opportunity to add some talent. And 7th overall, I have them selecting guard Nikola out of Mega Basket and Red Star, playing in the EuroLeague a bit, and he's had some really strong performances, especially on a permanent basis over the last couple of weeks. He's been extremely efficient as a primary ball handler, and he's even kind of starting to flash some of his shooting from the outside, kind of attacking and capitalizing off of defenders who are aggressively going under screens against him. He's hit a few pull-up threes over the last couple of weeks that have been pretty impressive for me on tape. I think for Topic specifically, one of the reasons why you would draft him if you're San Antonio, he's got the perfect blend of size and playmaking feel to be your franchise point guard next to Victor Wembanyama. If there's going to be a player in this draft that knows how to maximize a 7'4" target who has unique skill and unbelievable touch, it's probably Topic. His ability to hit short roll passers, I think, is going to be immense. But really what stands out to me, his ability to read the weak side of the floor while also occupying weak side help. And what do I mean by that? When I'm talking about when Nikola Topic, especially coming off to his right hand, when he's handling the ball in a pick and roll and he's going toward the right wing, he's able to kind of freeze the opposite side tag man, the opposite side low man, and make him think, okay, is he going to hit the roll man here on the pass, or is he going to skip it all the way to the opposite side corner? And with his size, Topic is capable of doing both. He's creative enough to fit a pass into the tight window. in the pocket on a bounce pass, but he also has the size to throw it over the top of a defense, either all the way to the opposite corner or to that roll man who is running to the front of the rim. Now you mix in Wembanyama's size and San Antonio's talent off of toe pitch, whether that be Keldon Johnson offensively or obviously Devin Vassell, who took another big step forward this year. Now I think you're cooking with gas a bit in San Antonio. The Spurs have a lot of optionality. They have a lot of great options this offseason on how they want to build and improve their team around Wembanyama. I think Nikola Topic would be a great starting point for them this draft. Moving on to pick number 8 now, we have the Memphis Grizzlies here, and again in this mock draft, I'm not going to overcomplicate things. Now you could ask yourself, do the Grizzlies actually have their long-term small forward of the future? Jake LaRavia had a couple nice performances down the stretch of the season. Gigi Jackson obviously is a fan favorite. I'm not sure how his play style is going to fit around John Morant, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., Marcus Smart when they're all healthy. I'm not sure about that myself personally. He does have a lot of the physical traits and size and some of the upside that obviously will excite a lot of people. But I think there's still a question there. Do they look at a wing or do they go with a big man? They traded Steven Adams. I think the easy, obvious answer here with who's still on the board for them is center Donovan Clingan from UConn. Just a pro's pro. He's going to come into the NBA. He's probably one of the most pro-ready NBA prospects in this year's draft, not only from a size and length profile, which obviously he checks the boxes in both areas there, but I also think just his skill set. He's capable of passing the ball off the point. He's capable as a screen setter and roll threat. He has pretty good touch around the rim, something I still think he could improve upon, obviously, but he's a big physical target who you can hit on rolls and obviously on the weak side as well if you're looking at a lob threat. Clingan's got a lot of the physical traits that stand out in terms of his ability to be a big-time roll man and shot blocker. And I think really the key word when you're describing Donovan Clingan is rim. He's going to be able to really deter guys at the rim defensively, and offensively he's going to exert a ton of rim pressure because he's just a huge big body target with good hands, able to catch the ball and finish. And you might be saying, okay, well, what separates him from someone like Zach Edey? Well, as we saw in the national championship game, Clingan runs the floor a lot better. He's got better downhill athleticism, downhill juice, but also laterally, I think he's a little bit more competent as well. I think he's going to be able to tag ball handlers in the pick and roll and then also still recover to his a little bit quicker and a little bit cleaner than Zach Edey. And that might not sound like a lot, but that is really the difference between the two and between Clingan being a super high quality starter for probably a very long time in the NBA and Edey being maybe a starting level center depending on which situation he ultimately lands in this year's draft cycle. Pick number 9, the Utah Jazz here now at this spot, and I think Utah specifically is an interesting team to mock for. You could look at Danny Ainge's draft history and you're probably going to look at them drafting a wing, or you could look at Utah's needs, and they need another ball handler. I know Keontae George was their quote-unquote point guard this year. I'm just not sure for Utah if that's going to be feasible for winning 40 to 50 games ever in the Western Conference. So I still think the Jazz need another ball handler, another guard, someone who can create their own shot but also run a ton of pick and rolls. And 9th overall, I have the Utah Jazz selecting guard Rob Dillingham out of Kentucky. Now I know some people are going to say, oh my gosh, you drafted him a 6th man, and some of the haters specifically think that Rob Dillingham is just a high volume microwave scorer who doesn't do anything else. And if you haven't watched him closely enough, I totally understand that idea because he does hit a bunch of tough shots and he is a player who can self-create. And looking at his size profile, a lot of people are going to compare him to someone like Lou Williams or Jamal Crawford just from the overall size skill set perspective as scorers. But I do think there is a pretty distinct difference between Dillingham and some of those players, and it's the fact that he's a very high quality playmaker already coming into the league. At Overtime Elite, they put the ball in his hands all the time. At Kentucky, he had the ball in his hands a decent amount of the time, even next to Reed Sheppard and playing behind DJ Wagner there, who was a top recruit coming into college. Dillingham's a very good pick and roll player, someone who can make reads out of the pick and roll. Now, some of the time that means calling his own number, especially when he's able to turn the corner against a slow-footed big man. But at the same time, he is capable of diming into his roller, making reads outside of just the pick and roll. Anytime that a team can send 3 at your 2-man game, all of a sudden Dillingham's going to have the talent to hurt that with his passing ability. I think he's a very underrated passer, averaged over 6 assists per 40 minutes this past year for Kentucky. Doesn't sound like a ton, but for the college game, it's actually pretty respectable. I think Dillingham is going to be a high-quality guard in the NBA. I think he's going to be a high-quality point guard in the NBA. Obviously, the comps to Tyrese Maxey, I think, are a little far-fetched. I don't think Dillingham has quite as much downhill juice and athleticism as Maxey. But Dillingham, I should say, downhill athleticism in terms of like speed, quickness profile. I think Dillingham is an underrated vertical athlete. Threw down even a tomahawk dunk this year and a windmill dunk as well. So I think he's an underrated athlete, honestly. Now, he didn't dunk a ton. I think he had like 5 dunks on the entire year. So don't read that as him being like the next Russell Westbrook or anything. But I think he's an underrated athlete, and I think he's smart enough to play point guard at the NBA level. I think he'll be better than Keontae George, and I think Utah here gets another guard who's capable of handling the rock, creating shots for themselves, but most importantly for others as well. That's where Lauri Markkanen really gets to eat a ton in this Utah offense. Pick number 10, the Houston Rockets now on the clock here with the pick they got from the Brooklyn Nets. In the James Harden trade, the Rockets do have an interesting long-term outlook, given the fact that they have all of those future Nets picks, as well as some of their own, again, moving forward. Houston could be slated for a big-time trade, but assuming they don't trade the pick here, who would be a really good fit for them 10th overall? I have them selecting forward/guard Dalton Knecht, and what is a little bit of a shakeup this week in my mocks, based on some of the information that we have gained in the last week or so, which I'll explain at pick number 12 specifically. But the Rockets here draft Knecht, who definitely would be a nice fit into Houston's offense in terms of things that they're lacking and currently really badly need. They need more off-ball movement specifically, especially on the perimeter, and they need just flat-out more shooting. Having an influx of spacing and a player who is capable off the basketball to create open looks for himself by using flare screens, by using pin screens, rip screens, whatever it may be, Knecht is pretty good at using all of them. And it's because at the heart and core of his actual talent, he's a shooter. And behind that, I think for Houston, if you're looking to improve the efficiency of Alperen Sengun as a post-up player, if you're looking to improve Jalen Green's efficiency and pick and roll usage and the efficiency that he finds in those areas, you need to have more floor spacing around those guys. And while Houston has a lot of talent, they don't have a ton of floor spacing right now. And I think Knecht is a player who would open up the court for these young players in a way that some of them already kind of struggle to do so for each other, like Amen Thompson, who I love. I think Amen Thompson is going to be a star in this league. He doesn't space the floor extremely well for Jalen Green or Alperen Sengun. Now, he does space in unique ways, sit in the dunker spot, cutting. Spacing isn't just standing on the three-point line. But I think as a team context, you do need some players who are capable as really big-time threats from behind the arc, and I think Dalton Knecht fits that very, very well. He also, at 23 years old on draft night, fits the age profile of this team as well. You're not drafting another 18, 19-year-old kid who you're going to have to wait a couple of years for. You're drafting someone who's ready to step in and provide key minutes and a key role for this team. And I think that's also super essential for Houston taking that next step forward this next season. Then at pick 11, we have the Chicago Bulls, one of the most difficult teams to mock for, because really I just don't understand the direction of their franchise. What are they going to do with DeMar DeRozan this offseason? He's a free agent. Zach LaVine, will he be on the roster? Obviously, Coby White took a huge step forward, should have been the most improved player of the year in my opinion. Maxey obviously had a great season. I'm not trying to discredit Maxey in any way, but I do think that ultimately Coby White improved the most out of everyone this past season. And then just looking at Vucevic as well. I mean, he had a bad season, if we're going to call it point blank. So the Bulls, they have a lot of needs. They have a lot of question marks around their organization. What will they do with pick number 11? I have them selecting forward Tidjane Salaun out of Cholet. And I think if you're talking about intriguing prospects, Tidjane Salaun might be at the very top of that list in this year's draft. He's got great NBA length at about 6'10", and he's also capable of shooting the ball. Now, he shoots a little bit of a moon ball right now where the ball arcs about 20 feet into the air seemingly, but it goes in at a pretty decent rate, and he's also got a great athletic profile as well. He plays big, he is big, and I think with his athleticism, some of the traits that he possesses as a long-term two-way player, there's going to be some excitement there in Chicago for him to land with the Bulls, a team that needs more size around Vucevic. I think gets it badly here with Tidjane Salaun, and I think he's going to be able to find a role without sacrificing too much of Chicago's overall offensive spacing. I do think this pick makes them better for next year, even though Salaun's probably more of a long-term project player. If you're going to really maximize who he can become, you're not going to see that in year 1 or year 2 of his career most likely. But I do think overall Chicago gets a player who has pro ball experience. I think he's going to be a good fit onto their existing roster because, again, mocking based on what I think these GMs are going to do, I think that Arturas Karnisovas is kind of all in on this style of Bulls basketball. And obviously, you know, we saw when Lonzo was healthy, this team looked really, really competitive, really good. But since Lonzo's injury, they just have completely fallen apart. They've gone by the wayside. But I do think Karnisovas, for better or worse, is kind of tied to this roster, and I think he's going to try to do everything in his power to make it work, and I think Salaun's probably one of the best options at number 11 for them to try and improve their current model of Bulls basketball. Pick number 12, the Oklahoma City Thunder, here now at this pick, and like I said earlier, I was going to explain something that we got more information on in this last week at pick number 12. So here we are now. The NBA, with their new kind of requirements for the draft combine, requiring everyone to participate who is draft eligible and invited, well, guess what? We also now have new information on who the teams are ranking where for prospects. And someone who is not included in the top 10, which to me I think is a mistake, is forward Cody Williams from Colorado. And that is exactly who I have the Oklahoma City Thunder here selecting 12th overall. So with that information right now, that kind of tells us that more teams than not are leaning against Cody Williams being in the top 10 in this year's draft. Now, remember, it only takes one team to select a guy, so it doesn't really mean anything because a team that really likes him at, say, 7th overall or maybe Danny Ainge 9th overall could take Cody Williams way before pick number 10 or way before pick number 12. But in the event that he does fall a little bit, like that survey kind of suggests, Cody Williams would be a great pick here for Oklahoma City. Not only is he the brother of ascending star Jalen Williams, but he's a completely different player in some ways. And I think this is one thing that we need to kind of wrap our mind around. I've been high on Cody Williams this draft cycle. It is not because of his last name. It's not because he's brothers with Jalen Williams. And the reason why I feel comfortable saying that, he was a higher ranked recruit than Jalen Williams. He had a better freshman season than Jalen Williams. And yet, for some reason, people keep slandering him for the things that he didn't do a ton of or didn't do super great consistently. Guess what? He was a freshman. Okay? Tell me what freshman did a lot of things super consistently. Kyle Filipowski, a player who we're going to talk about in a few picks, didn't shoot the ball well as a sophomore again. And yet people are going to write down that he has shooting upside in their scouting evals of him. So I just want to point out, yes, Cody Williams didn't shoot a ton of threes. But guess what he did do? He drove the ball and he drove it very, very well. And for a team like Oklahoma City, whose offense is built around drive and kick basketball, well, guess what? You're getting another guy who's going to be able to attack downhill, create for himself off the dribble, put pressure on the rim as a ball handler. He has the playmaking sense to create off of that and kick out to open shooters, which obviously OKC thrives off of. They don't have a ton of high volume three-point shooters, but they collectively shoot enough threes as a team based off the quality of looks they get. And I think Cody Williams, with his three-point shooting specifically, would fit into that model as well. This is a home run get for the Oklahoma City Thunder. This would be an automatic A+ draft grade from me if they're able to accomplish this on draft night. Cody Williams is going to be, I think, a very good player in the NBA, someone who I do have a lot of stock in and believe in with his kind of overall draft profile, his size, length, and athleticism, paired with his actual skill set as a driver of the basketball and his competency as a shooter when he's open. I think he's going to be a real threat in the NBA, and I think Oklahoma City here nails this pick. 12th overall, it's a no-brainer for them. Pick number 13, the Sacramento Kings here now. And this pick is very, very vital for them for a few different reasons. First of all, Malik Monk likely is gone in free agency. So you have a big need to replace, as well as perhaps needing to find a way to improve as your in your front court a bit, whether that be over Harrison Barnes long term, or whether that be as a backup center to replace JaVale McGee and Alex Len both this offseason. So Sacramento here, 13th overall. Which way do I have them going? I have them addressing the backcourt here, replacing some of those Malik Monk minutes with a guy who can really shoot the basketball, but has some creativity with the ball in his hands a bit. Not his primary role, but he's a very good fit off of Sabonis, and I think especially off of De'Aaron Fox going forward. 13th overall, I have the Sacramento Kings selecting guard Jared McCain out of Duke. This kid can really shoot it. I do think Reed Sheppard right now projects to be the best shooter in this year's draft, but Jared McCain is not far behind him. Really impresses me. I was looking at a lot of his analytics this past year in his sole season with the Duke Blue Devils, and he was just extremely efficient as a jump shooter in pretty much every single possible area. If you're looking at Sacramento, a team that likes to play fast, they like to get up a bunch of threes, they like to surround surround Fox and Sabonis with shooting, Jared McCain fits that profile extremely well. I also think he's a competitive defender. I think he's going to get his hands on loose basketballs. And I think if you're looking at Sacramento, this pick doesn't solve all of their issues, but it does plug a huge gap that they're likely going to have with Malik Monk leaving in free agency likely this offseason. So the Kings here getting Jared McCain, I think, take a real step forward. Again, long term, I think getting a young player in the building who fits their overall offensive identity is going to be a big-time W there for the Sacramento Kings this offseason. Pick number 14, we're back to the Portland Trailblazers. Remember, we had them go with forward Matas Buzelis. And for Portland here, I have them going with a little bit more length and size and some more shooting, especially on the perimeter. This is where center/forward Kyle Filipowski comes off the board. And listen, I'm not mocking people who are going to say that Filipowski has shooting upside. Obviously, I referenced that earlier. He hasn't really shown a ton of consistency there, but the upside is definitely present. There is going to be a lot of hope that Kyle Filipowski turns into a stretch big man. Now, there are also a ton of questions around him. People say, well, he's too small to be a center, and he's not skilled enough to be a power forward. Well, I would probably kind of rebuttal that with saying, well, he's really skilled for a center, and he's a lot bigger than most power forwards. It's really a perspective game when you talk about, things that players are lacking. For example, Karl Anthony Towns, people thought it wouldn't work there in Minnesota playing him at power forward. Look to the Wolves today, and they're a very, very good team, and maybe on the cusp of upsetting the reigning champion Denver Nuggets. You never know. But Kyle Filipowski, I still think there are a lot of things that he could do at the NBA level. He's a versatile scorer, scores off of cuts, scores off of rolls, scores off of post-ups, scores off of isolation, scores as a pick-and-roll popper. I think there's a lot of things that in the NBA he's going to find success at doing, because even though the NBA is a big math equation now, and you have to think about how teams are going to run their offense and how many threes they want to shoot and how many times do they want their star player to run a pick and roll, even though you can calculate all of that out, the reality with basketball is there are still crazy plays that happen all the time. A loose ball gets tipped up into the air and all of a sudden someone comes down with it and finishes at the rim. Filipowski is going to give you some of those possessions where it doesn't sound like, oh, that's what we want to invest in the lottery, but those are winning plays, and those are plays that really do kind of change the course of the game. Even the worst teams in the NBA are still very competitive with the best teams. Losing by 8, 9, 10 points a game sounds really, really bad, and trust me, it is for the NBA standard, but it's not like there's 30-point blowouts every single night. So if you're finding someone like Filipowski who can score 8 to 12 points a game in just a variety of different ways playing off of other people, that's a valuable get, especially for a team like Portland who's still trying to add talent, still trying to find who they really are. Getting someone like Filipowski who could be a fit around a variety of different players and player archetypes, I do think stands out to me as a potential really good get here for Portland at the end of the lottery. Now we're outside the lottery here with the Miami Heat, 15th overall. And this is really the best case scenario for this specific player. If a team is going to draft this guy, I think the best possible outcome here for that player specifically is the Miami Heat. And I think this would be a home run for him, and I think this would be the best case scenario for his long-term development. 15th overall, I have the Miami Heat selecting guard Isaiah Collier out of USC. Collier is a player who I think there's a lot of divide on right now. Some people have him as a top 2 or 3 player in their class. I'm not exactly sure where that's coming from. Now, I know a lot of it stems from his ability as a playmaker to get downhill, 2 feet in the paint, but I just don't see that myself. I think there's going to be a lot of concerns about his scoring gravity in the NBA. How does he handle when you put a center on him because of majority of his shots come at the rim, there's going to be a little bit of Russell Westbrookism to his game, I think, where teams are going to find ways to make him struggle as a scorer. Now, Westbrook obviously was an MVP. I'm not trying to diminish Russell Westbrook at all. His career was phenomenal. But I'm talking like late career Russell Westbrook where, you know, it kind of ebbs and flows with his productivity and his efficiency. And I think Ajay Collier might be slated for some of those same struggles, at least early in his career. I think one of the big swing skills for him is his pull-up jump shot. If he turns into a quality pull-up jump shooter, it completely rejuvenates his career and turns him into a player that is very, very tough to guard if he's able to stop on a dime and knock down 15 to 20-foot pull-up jump shots. But if he doesn't add that into his game as a regular, stable form of offense, then you're going to see teams disrespect him, sag off of him, and I think it really does kind of clog up his play style, because even though he's a very good passer, if he can't generate advantage consistently because teams are just sagging off of him so much, it will limit his playmaking upside as well if teams are able to stay home on their matchups. So I think it's an interesting chess match when you're kind of talking about Collier as a prospect, a player who I think there's a lot of talent there. I think there's a pretty good high IQ there in him as well, but it really comes down to, does his swing skill hit or miss? And if it misses, I'm not exactly sure, but if there's a place where he's going to really find himself, I think Miami is the spot. Erik Spoelstra is a genius head coach, one of the best in the entire NBA, and someone who I think could maximize Collier, who defensively has a lot of questions and limitations as well. The Heat zone, I think, would help Collier a bit as well early in his career. And I think Miami, just with their the importance that they put on, you know, how players are in shape and their conditioning, I think he would really maximize himself there in Miami. Pick number 16, we have the 76ers here now. This very likely could get traded on draft night. This pick, with Philly being a team probably hunting stars this offseason, that is a Daryl Morey classic. He is always in pursuit of a star player. They have cap space. This pick could very well get traded. For a player or for future picks, whatever it is. If Daryl Morey has something that he likes, he will trade this pick. But let's assume they don't, and let's go get a player who I think could be an impact contributor for them off the bench early in his career, and that is guard Devin Carter from Providence. Somebody who I think has sneaky two-way upside. Now going into next year, my assumption is the Sixers will retain Kyle Lowry. He will probably come off the bench for them again behind Tyrese Maxey. But getting another guard in the room, in the building, I think would be essential for them as well. If you're looking post-career Kyle Lowry, after Kyle Lowry at some point retires, Devin Carter could obviously be an essential piece for them moving forward. And I think he's ready to contribute now. I think you could play him alongside Maxey. I think you could play him alongside Kyle Lowry because he does a good job staying competitive and plays on the defensive end of the floor. He rides the ball handler's hip well. He's able to make plays at the rim defensively because of his positioning, both early in possessions and late in possessions. And I think offensively, obviously, a lot of shot creation diet for him. Now, I don't think he's going to have to play into that style a ton in Philadelphia with Maxey and Embiid around him. But I do think having that upside, that potential, is definitely a positive get here for Philadelphia. And then I think just his overall efficiency will take a good step forward, getting to play off of others a little bit more often than he did at Providence. And I think maybe a little bit of an adjustment period for him adjusting back to that style. But I do think overall he's got the skill set and the play type to fit into a team like Philadelphia where they're looking for guys who are ready to come in and contribute to winning. I think Devin Carter checks that box as well. Pick 17. The Los Angeles Lakers here now. Remember, most important part of this pick, the New Orleans Pelicans have until June 1st to decide whether or not they actually want this selection. So in this mock, I have the Lakers keeping the pick. The Pelicans could technically take the pick, or they could defer it to next year where they could have the Lakers unprotected pick in 2025, which is what I'm expecting actually happens. But the Lakers 17th overall here have a chance to add to their roster, and they need to add specifically more size, another big body to try and deal with Nikola Jokic. The Nuggets, year in, year out, just continue to bully the Los Angeles Lakers. You might want to say, oh, it's Darvin Ham, it's this. It doesn't matter who the coach is, okay? The roster is not adequate enough to beat the Denver Nuggets, and I think right now you see with the way Minnesota is battling the Denver Nuggets, the Lakers just don't have the same type of bodies, they don't have the same type of defensive ability, and they definitely don't have the same length. So the Lakers here 17th overall, they're going to go get a center. And this is a center I like quite a bit, center Kel'el Ware from Indiana. Somebody who, again, from a size, athleticism profile, he checks the boxes for a first-round center. Someone who I think can be an impactful two-way player in the NBA, both with Ware's ability to put on rim pressure and then also protect the rim. Now, there's been questions about his motor. There's been questions about how much, he's willing to sacrifice for a team, this, that, and the other thing. Outside of those concerns, which I think sometimes those concerns pre-draft really get blown out of proportion, I think Kel'el Ware specifically, once he's kind of in the NBA and maybe settled a bit, playing next to LeBron and Anthony Davis, I think role definition would be a lot easier for him. And I think from an impact standpoint, I could see him being a really successful year one player. He's already had 2 years of college experience. He went from Oregon, where he had a diminished role, to playing at Indiana, where he was really the star-centric player, the key piece of the team. Going back to LA now with the Lakers, playing off of LeBron, playing off of Anthony Davis. I think Kel'el Ware could have a similar impact that we've seen to Derek Lively, his first year in the league for the Dallas Mavericks. We know how good Lively is as a lob threat for Luka. Now we're giving LeBron a lob threat very similar. The Lakers could also lean into some 4-5 action, where they're looking at Anthony Davis handling the basketball, creating, and then Kel'el Ware playing off of that as a roll man. And I think ultimately one thing that's overlooked too is Kel'el Ware really increased his three-point volume this past year and shot it pretty well as well in those opportunities. So I think he's a very good get here for the Lakers with some real upside to actually stretching the floor. I don't typically believe that for a lot of big men who especially haven't shot a ton. Like, I didn't believe that for Derek Lively a ton, even though his pro day suggested, hey, maybe he could shoot it. I think overall for Kel'el Ware, though, he's someone who can actually shoot the basketball a bit. Probably won't be high volume early in his career, but by year 3, 4, 5 of his career, maybe we see him stepping out behind the three-point line with some consistency. Pick number 18, we have the Orlando Magic now. Obviously a tough end to their season in the playoffs, but I think we saw a ton of positives from this team. Paolo Banchero has really cemented himself as one of the key players to watch over the next couple of years. Obviously his development will be essential. The Orlando Magic need more shooting. I think that's very obvious, but if you listen to their front office speak, they don't tend to agree. And that's the issue when you're going through a mock draft. It's like, okay, well, I think they need this, but what does the team actually believe? They drafted Jett Howard last year, so perhaps they view Jett Howard as part of the solution there, which I think is reasonable. He shot the ball very well in the G League. Orlando still at 18. I think what they really need is a creation guard, someone who can create offense, and there really isn't anyone better available at this spot than guard Ajay Mitchell from UC Santa Barbara, and I really think this kid is a special player, someone who's going to turn into a very, 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 very good NBA player. I'm going to be higher on Ajay Mitchell than pretty much everyone else this draft cycle. I can guarantee it, because this kid, like I said earlier with Sheppard, Ajay Mitchell can dribble, pass, and shoot. Now the shooting isn't at a point of consistency where you're going to 100% trust it and rely on it night in, night out, but he can really dribble, he can really pass, and he knows how to get into the teeth of the defense and create opportunities, first of all for himself, but then as a byproduct of his scoring gravity, he can create for others as well. And I think his play style very unique from what Orlando already has with Paolo Banchero, who at times can be a bruiser, obviously a big, strong physical body. You also look at Franz Wagner, who I think is a shifty player who can finish around the rim, obviously very good working off the baseline. I think Ajay Mitchell, for me specifically, stands out as a guy who gets to 2 feet, and he's able to sell ball fakes and finish in ways that I don't think Orlando has a ton of right now. So I think he's going to be a very creative player for them. And I think, again, the big word is creative. He's going to create a ton of offense for them, and that's still something Orlando needs. And I think we saw that in the series against Cleveland. They just came up a day late and a dollar short in terms of offensive creation for long stretches of that series. So I think Mitchell specifically could be a home run pick for the Magic at number 18. Pick number 19, we're back to the Toronto Raptors now here, and this is a great opportunity for Toronto to continue adding more talent. Remember, we went with Zaccharie, Risacher, 19th overall, or 2nd overall, excuse me, and 19th overall. Now I have the Raptors selecting center Day'Ron Holmes II. So not only are we adding one tall, lengthy player in this draft for Toronto, we're actually adding 2 of them. And I think Holmes II is a home run pick here for the Raptors. Outside of the lottery, I think this is a really good get for them. We've seen a little bit of a run on big men, and talented big men at that. Day'Ron Holmes II, to me, stands out as a player who's not only going to be a dynamic pick and roll threat because of his ability to both roll and also pop out to the perimeter, but he's someone who's going to be able to protect the rim a bit for them. And I've said it for a long time here on the channel. If you're drafting a center, you need to do it before you really need him to play a ton. And with the Raptors still having Jakob Poeltl right now, they have team control on Poeltl for a little bit yet. They can draft Aaron Holmes. They can slowly and safely develop him, even though he's a junior prospect coming into the NBA. He's a little bit more NBA ready than most. There's still real importance in getting him in the building, giving him some time to adjust to the NBA game. And then by the time you're ready to move off of Jakob Poeltl, Aaron Holmes II should be ready to be your long-term starter, all with the idea of providing more spacing and floor balance around Scottie Barnes, and really flushing out the roster with shooting with Grady Dick, Aaron Holmes, Zaccharie, Risacher. All of a sudden the Raptors go from a team that hasn't valued a ton of shooting to having a bunch of it at, you know, pretty impressive spots. At your center spot and your forward spots, all of a sudden Scottie Barnes is going to be open to attack the rim a little bit more freely, and some of the decision making and passes are just going to be a little bit more obvious for them going forward. Then we move on to pick number 20, the Cleveland Cavaliers here now at this spot. And Cleveland's an interesting team. Obviously, 7-game series in round 1. We'll see how round 2 goes against the Boston Celtics, but for Cleveland specifically, I went with guard Jacoby Walter here out of Baylor. I've really highlighted shooting for them. Obviously, they valued that a ton, getting Sam Merrill, Max Strus, George Niang. It's already been a point of emphasis, which is why I feel comfortable saying that the Cavaliers will continue to emphasize that. They know how important it is, spreading the floor around Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, and providing that spacing as well for both Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. Now, Garland just hasn't had the year that I think a lot of people expected him to have. We'll see what happens with that situation there in Cleveland. I do think that's one worth monitoring. But Jacoby Walter gives you a wing player who just, a lot of his shot die is going to come from behind the arc. I think just having that shooting, that floor stretching ability around your core 4 there in Cleveland is extremely valuable and something that they just can't overlook. And I just don't see Kobe Altman passing on more shooting when it's available for him here 20th overall. Pick 21, we have the New Orleans Pelicans via the Milwaukee Bucks. Last week I had these picks somehow backwards. I don't even know how I managed that. You can tell I'm running on fumes at this point of the year with my NBA draft coverage and my coverage of the Minnesota Timberwolves. Everything, I'm just running on fumes. So thank you guys all for being super understanding of that last week. Have it corrected here for this week. And 21st overall, I have the New Orleans Pelicans selecting center Zach Edey from Purdue. And this is one of those interesting fits. The Pelicans already have one of the most unique physical players to ever play in the NBA in Zion Williamson. And they have a chance to add another freakishly physically gifted player. Zach Edey, gifted in a completely different way than Zion Williamson. Standing at about 7'3", Zach Edey towers above his defenders oftentimes. And I think one thing that is really misconstrued about Edey as a prospect, everyone's going to look at him as a post-up scorer. They're going to look at him as a guy you dump the ball into 15, 20 times a game, and you're going to let him go to his right baby hook a bunch. I'm telling you right now, that is not going to generate good NBA offense. So you might be saying, well, if that's not good, why would a team draft Zach Edey? He is going to be a very good pick and roll man. That is what he will be. He can be very effective on short rolls because he has a lot of touch. If you get him the ball 8 to 10 feet away from the hoop, he's going to have the floater and the little baby hook to get to as a scoring threat, especially against mismatches. If a team's trying to switch, if a team's trying to, take your initial ball handler. Like, imagine a Zion Williamson, Zach Edey pick and roll where Zion Williamson's coming off to his left hand. The big man has to take him. And then all of a sudden, Zach Edey is just rolling into space, and he's finding himself 8 feet away from the hoop for a little pocket pass and a little layup. That's where you get some real deadly work from Zach Edey. He ranked in the 99th percentile this past year as a pick and roll man in college basketball. He ranked in like the mid 50s for post-up percentile. So we're not looking at a player who is going to be a post-up player in the NBA. We're looking at a player who's going to be a very, very, very good pick and roll man. He's going to sit in deep drop coverage defensively. The whole point of having Zach Edey, you're going to give up less shots at the rim, and you're going to get more shots at the rim. And that is the math equation the Pelicans want to win. With their zoom offense, Edey could be very, very, very good as someone who initiates some of those dribble handoffs. Now, he has some strides to go as a passer for sure. He needs to improve a ton yet. in some ways, but I think playing in the NBA, getting accustomed to the NBA speed and pacing, I think would be very beneficial for him. I think Zach Edey, someone who makes some real sense there in New Orleans. For me, a comp for Edey at this point is a slower but bigger Ivica Zubac, which is a quality NBA player for sure. Pick 22, we are looking at the Phoenix Suns, and the Suns here at this spot of the draft cycle. Well, first of all, it's very likely they just flat out trade this pick because Matt Ishbia does not know what he's doing. But let's assume, for the sake of the video, that the Suns do keep the pick. First of all, they should go point guard, but they're not going to do that, I can promise you, because Matt Ishbia, again, does not want to take the ball out of the hands of Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, even though we just saw in the playoffs that they need to do that in order to win games because they need guys who can actually create consistent offense for them, but they won't do that. So 22nd overall, who do the Suns take? They take a player who can be a nice ancillary piece who fits around those guys, and that is forward Tristan da Silva from Colorado, someone who shoots the ball relatively well, I think has some secondary playmaking to him that could definitely fit alongside that big three. And ultimately for Phoenix, he provides more length, size. Obviously some people like him as a defensive prospect. I'm a little bit more gun shy on that. I think, the athleticism is just not all there for me to say that he's going to be a fluid enough athlete to be a high quality defender in the NBA. But what I do think is he's smart enough to at least have an impact. My comp for him is maybe a little bit better of a Jake LaRavia, kind of in that same range. I didn't like LaRavia much during his draft cycle, so for Phoenix specifically, I'm not sure how much this really moves the needle for them, although since they made the trade for Bradley Beal, I really haven't liked their team context anyway, and now they're stuck with Beal's contract because there's not a single team in the league that would take him in a trade that Phoenix would be willing to do. So the Suns are at a weird spot. I'm not sure if they're going to be salvageable or not. We'll see if Kevin Durant gets traded. Probably won't, but we'll see. I think the Suns are in a very weird spot in time right now, and I'm not sure how they really get out of the hole that they dug themselves within the last 12 months. Pick number 23, the Milwaukee Bucks here now. This pick comes from the New Orleans Pelicans, like we just talked about. And with this selection, I have the Bucks selecting Tyler Smith out of G League Ignite. Part of the reasoning here and the rationale for Tyler Smith, first of all, I look at MarJon Beauchamp and Andre Jackson Jr. as two players capable of filling off the wing for them. So in this mock, I instead opted to draft someone who is more of a true power forward, someone who could maybe give the Bucks some versatility off the bench in the event that they trade Bobby Portis this offseason. And the rationale for picking Tyler Smith specifically is his athleticism. He is someone who jumps out of the gym. Kind of reminds me of Terrence Jones, former Houston Rocket back in the day, where a lot of his shot creation profile came in the mid-range. And I think Tyler Smith has a good chance of progressing that to being a quality and reliable NBA three-point shooter. That's really the upside for him there if you're Milwaukee. And then just from an overall size athleticism standpoint, Milwaukee's just a slow team. They're a team that doesn't have a lot of athleticism outside of Andre Jackson Jr. and MarJon Beauchamp and obviously Giannis Antetokounmpo. Getting one more player in the mix that can really run and jump, even though that sounds super elementary and rudimentary, it's really something that Milwaukee's lacking. They need more athleticism. They need more length and size with athleticism especially. I think Tyler Smith provides that to you. I think it was very apparent against the Pacers, a team that's very quick and get up and down the court extremely well. Playing against Bobby Portis and Brook Lopez is just not a good matchup for Milwaukee. So the more length and size and athleticism, the better. The Bucks get it here with Tyler Smith, 23rd overall. Pick 24, we have the New York Knicks. Now this pick comes from the Dallas Mavericks. This is the final asset from the Kristaps Porzingis trade. And hopefully the Knicks pick someone here because it would be the only asset they have from the Kristaps Porzingis trade, very interestingly enough. But 24th overall, the New York Knicks at this spot select forward Justin Edwards out of Kentucky. This is a player who I like quite a bit. I think has the chops to become a quality two-way player in the NBA. Now, I think it's going to take some time. It's going to take the right development team around him. The consistency of his jump shot is going to be a question. There was moments this past year for Kentucky where he was lights out. Even had a game where he just did not miss a single jump shot. But there's also games where he's going 0 for. So there's going to be moments in time where Justin Edwards has to probably spend some time in the G League, probably work on his game a bit, especially playing off the catch and just making himself a little bit more of a threat. But from an athletic standpoint, first of all, he fits the way that Tom Thibodeau would want to coach. I think Justin Edwards has all the tools to be a very good corner sitter, someone who can crash the offensive glass, obviously back cut off the baseline. A lot of the things that are essential to New York Knicks basketball right now, around Brunson, around Josh Hart, around Dante DiVincenzo, I think Justin Edwards could provide. And I think ultimately for New York, this is kind of, gravy on top of the mashed potatoes here. They're already a very good team. They have back-to-back picks here in this first round. I could see them trading both of them and moving completely out of this draft, trying to keep their trade flexibility alive. That's an underrated aspect to watch for as well. The Knicks could look to trade both picks 24 and 25 to future years, keep their trade assets alive, and really continue to wait for the right superstar to come along to put alongside Jalen Brunson there in New York. But assuming they don't do that, they have already drafted Justin Edwards now, 25th overall. Who would they add into the mix as well next to Justin Edwards? And I have them going with a guard here in Carlton Carrington out of Pittsburgh. I do like Carrington's game a lot. I think Carrington for me is a player who I could see Thibodeau getting behind as well, because he rebounds the basketball, is impactful on multiple areas of the game. Not only does he rebound the ball, but he's capable of scoring the ball. Now, a lot of his shot profile that suggests he's going to be a quality scorer at the NBA level comes from the mid-range area. So you might be saying, well, that's a little bit of a point of hesitation for me. Now, I do think the Knicks are one of the teams that could afford that shot diet. You already look at the way that Brunson and Julius Randle play. We'll see what happens with Julius Randle's future there in New York long term. Not suggesting he's getting moved or anything, but you never know. You never know. Obviously, with the way they're playing with him out, I do think it's a possibility. So Carlton Carrington could assume some of those jump shots over time, of course. Not talking his rookie year or anything crazy like that. But for me, like the hopeful aspiration for drafting someone like Carlton Carrington is a young DeJounte Murray. Now, less two-way version of that. Carlton Carrington is not going to be the defender DeJounte Murray grew into in San Antonio early in his career, but I do think that there are some traits about Carrington's game when it comes to impacting the team on the glass, creating for others, and also being a mid-range pull-up jump shooter. Carrington has a lot of those similar traits. So for New York specifically here, this is a draft and develop selection if they were to keep this pick on draft night. Pick 26, the Washington Wizards here now. This pick comes from the Los Angeles Clippers through a series of trades. This pick has been traded multiple times. But the Wizards now at this spot, after drafting Alex Sarr to kick off our draft, have the opportunity to add a little bit more talent into the mix. And 26th overall, I have them going with guard/forward Trenton Flowers, playing for the Adelaide 36ers in the NBL. This kid's working really hard on his game right now. I can assure you of that. And he's got all the physicals. This is a player who I think in the draft combine is really going to stand out for a lot of teams because of his collection of playing off the catch. He's someone who I think shoots the ball extremely well off the catch. Also someone who has the size, speed, athleticism profile to impress people in the upcoming week or so. Because at about 6'9", he has some guard skills. Now, he's not going to be an NBA point guard, but I could see him being a 2 or a 3, someone who is a hybrid guard forward type, can defend across multiple positions, extremely athletic, jumps out of the gym, and again, he's got downhill speed to him that I think is going to impress people. So if the Wizards, a team that is very early on in their rebuild, looking for more talent, looking for more upside, you already drafted Sarr, you have Bilal Coulibaly. If you're looking for more defensive upside, I think Flowers definitely fits into that because of his size profile as a guard, someone who's going to defend guards. That's going to be a unique weapon for Washington, next to Sarr, next to Coulibaly. But also from the offensive perspective, his ability to play off the catch, and I think his upside as a playmaker, not playing at the point guard position, I think also gives Washington a little bit more life around Jordan Poole and a little bit more juice into their overall transition offense and their offense in general. Pick 27, the Minnesota Timberwolves now at this spot. The Wolves, man, what a feel-good story this year. They're playing some of the best basketball I have ever seen, especially on the defensive end of the floor. Game 2 against the Nuggets was just incredible as they stymied Denver to just 35 first half points. And Minnesota, a team that has built itself on defense, well, they're going to lose some of their best defenders in the next couple of years. Nickeil Alexander-Walker's only signed for a couple of seasons at a very cheap number, one of the best contracts in the entire NBA. Well, they're going to lose him at some point more than likely with their cap situation. Kyle Anderson slated to be a free agent this offseason. The Wolves are at a spot where they are going to lose some of their talent. This is their window. This year is the year that they have to go out and really make some noise in the playoffs, and they're doing it. So credit to them. But now this draft pick is going to be about trying to replace some of that defensive talent they're losing, and this is a draft and develop pick, okay? They also have some other guys like Josh Minott, Leonard Miller waiting in the wings who are going to probably ascend into role players for them in the near or distant future. But 27th overall, this is a far out pick. This is a pick saying, hey, 3-4 years from now, we're going to need this guy to defend for us. That is Ryan Dunn from Virginia, one of the best defensive prospects I've ever evaluated. And if you hear me say that, you might say, well, why is it going to take him a few years to get on the floor for Minnesota, a team that values defense so much? This guy can't score. This guy can't play NBA offense right now, to be honest with you. Now, he cuts extremely well. He finishes at the rim extremely well. He's super athletic. He's going to be a good transition offense player. The issue with him, though, is he doesn't shoot the ball very well at all, doesn't shoot it very frequently, and he doesn't play make off the dribble. So he's a very one-dimensional offensive player, which is get to the rim, score. If he doesn't get to the rim, he's not going to score. And most of the time, him getting to the rim means off the basketball as either a cutter or running the floor in transition. Now, that's not all his fault. He played for Virginia, which is a team that historically never is good offensively because they run blocker mover, which is an outdated offensive system and something that just flat out doesn't work. So, you know, take that with a grain of salt as well. I think Ryan Dunn in an NBA context with a bunch of shooting around him could look quite a bit better offensively if he's used properly and correctly, which that's a big if, right? When it comes to evaluating players, you can have these dream situations, dream scenarios for guys, and then if you use that to evaluate, first of all, there's going to be a lot of disappointment because some of these coaches aren't as creative as you want them to be about making a prospect or a player work. So Ryan Dunn, I think there's a lot of work to be had with his offensive game, but if there's a team that's willing to wait on the defensive upside by developing his offensive game in the process, it definitely is the Minnesota Timberwolves. Pick number 28, the Denver Nuggets here now at this spot. In the Nuggets, they didn't value signing anyone in free agency this past offseason. They let Bruce Brown go for nothing, and it seems like it's hurting them a bit now in this series with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, this is not a nail in the coffin for Denver. I'm not saying the series is over. I respect the Nuggets a lot. I respect Nikola Jokic a lot. Jamal Murray is obviously one of the best playoff risers in recent NBA history. So the Nuggets are not dead in the water yet, but they definitely look like they are a little outmatched currently. So how do the Nuggets add some more talent onto their roster going into next year? I think center Yves Missi is really a great starting point for the Nuggets. Now, he's raw. I don't know how really ready he is for NBA playoff minutes at this point. I'm not sure if he'll be ready 12 months from now either. But at some point, the Nuggets need to figure something out with their backup center spot. The Denver Nuggets against the Timberwolves have not had a backup center this entire series. They refused to play DeAndre Jordan. I can understand why. DeAndre Jordan's not a good NBA player in the year 2024. So I understand some of the decisions Michael Malone is making. But at the same time, it just feels like the cupboard's a little bare for him. It feels like they're maybe a player or two short in this series. And getting a big man is essential for them. And I think Yves Missi, someone who has the physical traits, the tools, the ability to play above the rim. Maybe you could even play him next to Jokic for stretch minutes. Now, I'm not suggesting you do that a ton, but maybe you could get away with it. Just adding a little bit more rim protection, I think, would be huge for Denver. Minnesota is just completely killing them in the paint in this series on both ends. Denver's not scoring in the paint. Minnesota's scoring in the paint at will. I think Yves Missi is the type of player who could help you on both ends of the floor in that regard, both as a rim pressure lob threat and also a rim protector who, if he fouls out, good. It means he's trying his hardest to keep players from scoring at the rim. So the Nuggets get a backup center here, one who, listen, there's development that needs to be had. He doesn't have a ton of defensive feel right now, but the physical traits are all there. And I think Denver, a team that is lacking a true high-quality backup big man, Yves Missi could maybe turn into their Paul Reed, for example, if we look at what the Sixers have behind Joel Embiid out in the Eastern Conference. Pick number 29, the Utah Jazz here now at this spot. This pick comes from the Oklahoma City Thunder. This pick has also been traded multiple times. Most recently was from the Toronto Raptors to Utah. And now the Jazz at this spot have a chance to add a little bit more talent. They're going with forward Johnny Furphy out of Kansas. Now this is the Danny Ainge type of player. I'm just gonna leave it at that. You guys know what I mean. But 29th overall, the Jazz here at this pick, I think, are going to look for wings. That's something that they're very thin on. After trading Simone Fontecchio, who's really their only true wing they had on the roster, it's just they're pretty shy on guys who are hybrid forwards or just forwards in general. So getting Furphy on the roster, someone who can shoot the ball extremely well. He's a high volume, quick trigger three-point shooter. Getting a player like Furphy is definitely going to have its value for the Utah Jazz, but he also finishes at the rim extremely well. It screams role player. His draft profile screams NBA role player. He's going to have a nice 8 to 10 year career. He's going to shoot the ball well. He's going to shoot when he's open. He's going to cut. He's going to get to the rim in transition. He'll attack some closeouts. Everything you want a role player to do, Johnny Furphy's going to do. I think this is a fitting pick for Utah, who had a Kansas wing for a while with Ochai Agbaji. Now they no longer have him after trading him to Toronto, but they trade him out for this Kansas wing here in Johnny Furphy. Pick number 30, the final pick here of the first round, the Boston Celtics now on the clock. And I think for Boston specifically, what is one target that you could point out that they could use a little bit more of? And for me, I landed on backup defensive guard play. And this is going to be a hot button one. I have the Boston Celtics going with guard Bronny James out of USC. And I know some people are going to say, oh my gosh, you're just doing that because of his last name. I don't have any benefit here of quote-unquote nepotism. I don't get anything for mocking LeBron James' son in my mock draft. Okay, that doesn't benefit me in any way. The reason I'm putting Bronny James in here, first of all, Boston's in a spot where they already have their core pieces cemented to their roster. Jaylen Brown's extended, Kristaps Porzingis is extended, Drew Holiday's extended, Jason Tatum will get extended, Derek White will get extended. The Celtics are about to pay a ton of money for those 5 guys for the next 4 or 5 years because the Celtics have arguably the best roster in the league, and they want to win, and they want to win at the highest level, and they're trending in that direction. What they need to do around those guys is continue to flush out their roster with players who are high IQ, defensive-minded pieces. They drafted Jordan Walsh in the 2nd round last year. Drafting Bronny James this year, I think, makes a ton of sense. Now, I know people are going to say, he averaged 4 points a game. Yeah, he also had a heart attack, basically, less than a year ago. He came back after a cardiac arrest, missed most of training camp, if not all of it, for USC, and kind of just got thrown in. And listen, USC was already bad. And if you want to know why his connectivity and some of Bronny James' best offensive traits didn't come around, look at the time of possession that Isaiah Collier had the basketball for USC. That's one thing I'm going to say. The USC Trojans did not have a lot of spacing. They did not have a lot of high up-tempo play style on their roster. And I think Bronny James, as a result, struggled. In addition to some of his own personal off-the-court stuff that he was dealing with from his health perspective, I think the situation set up Bronny James to fail. But from an actual prospect profile standpoint, I think he's a super high IQ player on both ends of the floor. I think he knows how to pass when he's supposed to pass. I think he knows how to attack defenses. I think he's just a very smart player. And I think defensively, his IQ really stands out to me with the way that he covered up for Isaiah Collier defensively a lot of the time at USC, the way that he was finding success as a zone defender. And you might say, well, teams don't run a ton of zone. Boston ran a decent amount of zone this year with Drew Holiday in the middle. So having one more high IQ player who, listen, the Celtics probably aren't going to play Bronny James a bunch in his rookie season. That's just the reality. This is a draft and develop. This is a draft and, hey, once you get physically right, healthy again, fully, and you get your feet underneath of you, we believe you could be a good player. And I think Bronny James has all of the tools to become a good player in the NBA. I trust his shot. Now, I know he did not shoot it very well at USC. I trust his shot. I think he will shoot it well in the NBA if he finds a rhythm and if he finds a team that gives him a runway to his development. And I think the Boston Celtics are the best team suited to do that this offseason. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know in the comment section below what you thought about the draft picks throughout this video. Let me know who I didn't mock that you think should have been in this first round. Had a lot of fun recording. I hope you guys really did enjoy. If you did, make sure to leave a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel for more content, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.